Captain Sarah Donovan stood at the helm of the Archer, her gaze fixed on the holographic display showing the alien fleet arrayed across the stars. Her crew, a blend of seasoned soldiers and new recruits, moved like clockwork. But today, the calm before the storm felt like an omen. The calm's officer, Lieutenant Walker, turned from his station, a slight tremor in his voice. "Captain, they've broken through the outer defense perimeter. The fleet is advancing." Sarah's pulse quickened. "How long do we have?" 5 minutes, Walker replied, his eyes wide. The enemy was faster than they'd anticipated. More coordinated. Their tactics were terrifyingly precise. Sarah took a deep breath, pushing her emotions aside. This wasn't the time for hesitation. Divert all power to the forward shields. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. A voice crackled from behind her. "You're planning to fight them head-on?" It was Zan Voss, the mysterious alien pilot who joined their crew under the most bizarre circumstances. His expertise was undeniable, but his past remained a mystery, an enigma that had yet to be fully unraveled. "You have a better idea?" Sarah shot back, her voice steady but edged with impatience. Zan's sharp blue eyes gleamed in the dim light of the bridge, and for a moment, Sarah felt his scrutiny. Zan's lips curled into a wry smile. "I was hoping we could outsmart them, but if you insist on charging in..." His words trailed off, and he turned his attention back to the tactical display. "Your way it is, then." Sarah's fingers hovered over the controls. Every instinct screamed that fighting back directly was a bad idea. But there was no time for second-guessing. The aliens, known as the Oryx, had been relentless in their expansion across the galaxy, destroying colonies, obliterating entire fleets, and leaving only whispers in their wake. Humanity had been fighting back for months, but so far, each victory had been hard-won, each inch of ground paid for with blood. "Let's show them what humanity's made of," Sarah muttered under her breath. She locked eyes with her tactical officer, Lieutenant Monroe, who gave a brief nod. "Coordinates locked, Captain." The ship lurched as it surged forward, the Archer cutting through the darkness of space with a speed that made Sarah's stomach twist. Every nerve was on edge as the alien fleet loomed larger on the view screen. Even with all the training, nothing could prepare her for the sense of dread that settled deep in her bones. "Captain!" Monroe's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. "Enemy capital ship coming into range." Talaris. The Oryx commander. Sarah had heard rumors about him, whispers of his ruthlessness and cold intelligence. The fact that he was personally overseeing the attack confirmed her worst fears. Her mind raced. The Oryx were formidable, but they were not invincible. The question was, could humanity outlast them long enough to turn the tide? Zen spoke again, his voice smooth and calm. "The Archer won't survive a direct confrontation with Talaris' flagship. We need to find a way to take out their command ship, or this battle is already lost." Sarah's jaw clenched. He was right, but that was easier said than done. They had no time to form a plan, no time to gather intel. It would be up to sheer instinct and determination to survive. "All hands brace for impact," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The ship shuddered as enemy fire lit up the hull, and for a split second, Sarah felt the weight of every life aboard the Archer resting on her shoulders. Then, with a determined glance at Zan, she whispered, "We fight to the end." And with that, they launched into the heart of the storm. The deafening hum of the Archer's engines vibrated through Sarah's chest as she stood before the tactical display, eyes narrowed, heart racing. The alien fleet was closing in, their ships relentless and coordinated. Every second counted, and the pressure felt suffocating. "Shields holding, Captain." "But barely." Lieutenant Monroe's voice crackled through the comms, his calm exterior betraying the tension in his words. "The Oryx are adjusting their fire. It won't be long before they breach." Sarah's gaze flicked to the view screen, where the first wave of incoming fire collided with the ship's shields, shaking the vessel to its core. Sparks scattered across the darkened bridge. She steadied herself, knowing they had only moments before the situation became catastrophic. "We need to hit them first, while they're still positioning." Ready to engage, Captain! Lieutenant Walker called from his station, his hands flying over the controls. Beside her, Zan Voss's tall figure loomed, silent but watchful. The alien had been on the Archer long enough to know the stakes, but his expression remained unreadable. For all his skill in combat, Sarah still didn't know the full extent of his past, and that unsettled her. He was a wild card, unpredictable. Yet, in moments like these, she couldn't afford doubts. "We go in hard," Sarah ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Full speed ahead. Target their flagship's engines. Let's slow them down." Zan glanced over, his lips curling in the faintest of smirks. "I like your style, Captain." The ship lurched forward, its engines roaring to life as they surged toward the heart of the Oryx fleet. Sarah's stomach twisted with the anticipation of what was to come. Their plan was simple but dangerous. Close the distance before the Oryx could reposition their guns, strike fast, and disable the flagship's engines before reinforcements could arrive. "Hold on!" Sarah shouted, gripping the armrest of her chair as the Archer plunged into the heart of the enemy formation. The sound of gunfire was deafening as they dodged and weaved between enemy ships, evading the Oryx's deadly strikes by mere inches. Monroe's voice broke through the chaos. "Captain, we're being targeted by their second wave. We can't outrun them!" Sarah snapped. "Engage evasive maneuvers. Have Walker ready the torpedoes." With a fierce determination, she keyed in the order to launch a volley of missiles aimed directly at the Oryx flagship's thrusters. The torpedoes screamed through space, their sleek, deadly forms cutting a path toward their target. 5 seconds to impact." Walker's voice sounded over the intercom, calm despite the tension. Zan's sharp eyes remained locked on the viewscreen, tracking their missiles with practiced precision. "Ready to fire once they breach," he murmured, but Sarah's focus was on the approaching countdown. "Now!" she commanded. The torpedoes slammed into the flagship's engine port with an earth-shaking explosion. The Oryx ship faltered, its forward momentum grinding to a halt. But just as Sarah allowed herself a brief moment of victory, the alien ship retaliated. A powerful beam of red energy shot from its cannons, tearing through space toward the Archer. "Brace!" Monroe shouted. The Archers shuddered violently as the energy beam hit their shields, forcing Sarah to fight to maintain her footing. She gritted her teeth as the shockwave rattled the entire ship. The console in front of her flickered, but she pushed through it. "Damage report!" she barked. "Shields down to 30%. Monroe replied, voice strained. "Hull integrity is compromised." A cold knot of fear twisted in Sarah's gut, but she pushed it aside. They were still alive. And alive meant they could fight back. Zan's voice cut through the growing tension. "They won't stop. Not until they've crushed every last one of us." His tone was grim, but his eyes shone with an intensity that Sarah couldn't help but respect. "We need a new strategy, Captain." Sarah's mind raced. The Oryx were formidable. But they hadn't reckoned with humanity's will to survive. "Prepare for a boarding operation," she said, her voice hardening with resolve. "We fight them up close." Zan raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "I thought you might say that." The Archer lurched again, but this time, it was a different kind of fight that awaited them. The Archer's boarding pods shot through the black expanse like missiles, cutting through the void with ruthless efficiency. Inside the pod, Sarah's pulse hammered in her ears as she gripped the harness. The calm before the storm gnawed at her insides. She knew what was coming. Every mission, every fight, there was always that moment before everything erupted into chaos. Beside her, Zan's stoic demeanor remained unchanged. His face was a mask, but Sarah knew him well enough to see the subtle tension in his jaw. He was prepared for whatever came, but even he couldn't deny the risk. They were about to board an enemy flagship packed with Oryx warriors, and the odds of survival weren't great. The pod shuddered as it neared the Oryx ship's hull. Sarah's hand tightened on her rifle, her breath slow and steady. She glanced at Zan, who met her gaze with an unreadable expression. There were no words. None were needed. The moment they stepped onto that enemy ship, it was all action. And they were ready for it. A sharp jolt sent the pod slamming into the Oryx vessel's outer wall. The moment the magnetic locks engaged, the doors exploded open. Sarah was the first through, her boots hitting the cold metal floor with a thud. The interior was dimly lit, a stark contrast to the bright, sterile lights of the Archer. The air smelled of oil, ozone, and something faintly alien. Monroe's voice came over the comms. "We've got 5 minutes before reinforcements arrive. Get in, disable their command center, and get out." Sarah nodded, adjusting her grip on the rifle. She motioned for Zan to take the lead, and without a word, he moved forward, his presence imposing in the narrow hallway. His movements were fluid, instinctive, like a predator who had long since honed its instincts. Sarah followed close behind, her eyes scanning every shadow, every corner, every potential threat. "We're close," Zan muttered as they approached the main command room. A door slid open with a hiss. Inside, a group of Oryx soldiers stood, caught off guard by their sudden intrusion. They were tall, armored, their skin a metallic gray. Their eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence. One of them hissed, raising a plasma rifle. "Contact!" Sarah barked. "Engage!" In an instant, gunfire erupted. The sound was deafening, the blinding flashes of energy weapons stinging her eyes as she dove for cover. Her heart raced, but she kept her focus. Every move was calculated, every shot a desperate measure to stay alive. She heard the thud of Zan's boots as he moved like lightning, his sword flashing in the dim light. He was in his element, an unstoppable force. Sarah's rifle kicked back in her hands as she fired on the Oryx soldiers, taking down one with a precise shot to the chest. She barely had time to register the victory before another alien lunged at her from the side. Without thinking, she spun, delivering a roundhouse kick that sent the Oryx soldier crashing to the ground. She didn't hesitate, using the momentum to roll behind a bulkhead for cover. Her breath came in short bursts, her heart hammering in her chest. But she was alive. Zan was already at the command console, slicing through the Oryx's security system. His eyes flickered with the rapid movements of his fingers, and the door to the command center began to slide open. The last of the Oryx soldiers had been neutralized, and they were one step closer to their goal. "Captain," Zan said, his voice calm and steady, "the command center is ours. But they're sending reinforcements. We need to finish this now." Sarah glanced over her shoulder. The sound of distant footsteps echoed down the hall. She had no intention of waiting. "Seal the doors. Get the systems offline. We don't have much time." Zan moved with efficiency, his hands a blur as he worked to shut down the Oryx's communications. Sarah stood guard, rifle aimed at the door, every fiber of her being ready for the next fight. "Done," Zan said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "The Oryx command is offline. They're blind." The tension in Sarah's chest began to loosen, but it was only temporary. She knew they weren't done yet. Reinforcements would come, and the fight would continue. But for now, they had the advantage. "We fight until the end," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. As Zan met her gaze, something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding that this was just the beginning. The Oryx might have lost their command, but the war was far from over. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, and Sarah gripped her rifle tighter. "Get ready," she said. In the heart of the Oryx flagship, the true test of humanity's resolve was about to unfold. The door to the Oryx command center hissed open with a sharp, mechanical groan. Sarah's pulse quickened, but she remained calm, her rifle poised. The dim light of the control room bathed everything in an eerie glow, casting long shadows across the broken machinery. The hum of the Oryx ship's core reverberated through the walls, a reminder of how much time they didn't have. Zan stood beside her, his silhouette a dark contrast against the flickering screens. His focus was unyielding, and despite the chaos that had surrounded them, his movements were smooth, efficient. "We're almost there," he muttered, eyes locked on the central console as his fingers moved across the alien interface with unnerving precision. Behind them, the sounds of distant thuds and footsteps grew louder. The Oryx reinforcements were drawing nearer. "We need to finish this, now," Sarah said, her voice low but urgent. She turned to the hallway, listening to the ominous approach of the enemy. "Can you lock them out?" Zan's lips thinned. "I've sealed the access points, but it won't hold for long. If we don't disable the core systems soon, we're trapped." Sarah didn't need to hear more. She understood the gravity of the situation. If the Oryx could regain control of their ship's systems, they'd be able to launch a counterattack that would decimate the Archer and its crew. Time was their enemy now. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed down the hall. The door to the command center slammed open, revealing a half-dozen Oryx warriors. Their glowing eyes burned with fury, their weapons aimed directly at the intruders. Sarah's hand shot out, her rifle firing with precision. One of the Oryx soldiers dropped, the others hesitating for a fraction of a second. That was all the time they needed. "Cover me!" Sarah shouted as she dashed for the central console, ducking behind a nearby terminal. Her heart raced, but her mind was clear, adrenaline sharpened her focus. Her rifle's muzzle flared again, and another Oryx soldier crumpled to the floor. Zan, never missing a beat, joined her in the firefight. His combat style was fluid, almost mechanical in its efficiency. Each strike of his blade was precise, cutting through the Oryx with the brutal grace of a predator. Sarah admired his skill, but she couldn't afford to lose herself in awe. There were still too many left. The Oryx roared in anger, firing back with their own high-powered weapons. The air crackled with energy as plasma bolts sizzled past. Sarah ducked behind cover, the heat from the close shots burning her skin. She shot again, and another soldier fell. "They're not stopping," Zan grunted, his voice tinged with frustration. He was relentless, but even he knew when to retreat. Sarah's eyes darted to the flashing red lights on the console. They were close, so close. One more push, and they could disable the entire ship's communications. Without it, the Oryx would be blind. They might even stand a chance. "Cover fire!" Sarah ordered. Zen nodded sharply, stepping forward to intercept the next wave of shots. With her heart pounding, Sarah reached the console. Her fingers flew over the alien controls, accessing the command protocols that would sever the ship's ability to call for backup. The Oryx had underestimated the humans' ability to adapt, but Sarah had learned quickly how to manipulate their technology. She understood their systems now, even if they didn't understand her. The lights in the room flickered as the system's integrity wavered. The air hummed with tension as the countdown began. "I've almost got it," Sarah said through gritted teeth, her eyes locked on the flashing sequence. Just as the last Oryx warrior lunged at her, Sarah slammed her fist down on the final key. The ship groaned. The lights dimmed. The Oryx forces froze. "We did it," Sarah breathed, allowing herself a brief moment of victory. But the relief was short-lived. The entire ship shook violently, a deep, resonating vibration that rattled their bones. Zan grabbed her arm, his expression hardening. "They're activating the self-destruct sequence." The countdown was already flashing on the screen, 5 minutes. "Time's up," Sarah muttered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still surging through her veins. "Let's get out of here." They moved in unison, their focus unwavering as they sprinted for the exit, knowing they had no time to spare. The ship would explode. Whether or not they could escape was another story. Outside the command room, the Oryx reinforcements had already regrouped. But Sarah wasn't going to let them win. She wouldn't let the Archer fall, not today. "Ready for the final push?" Zan asked. Sarah didn't answer, but the determined look in her eyes spoke volumes. There was no turning back now.